Greetings guys, gals and non-binary pals, and welcome back to another virtual Pride video. I hope that you are all celebrating Pride as well as fighting for what's right at the moment. I hope that we're all banded together and fighting for true equality. That is what Pride Month is all about, and so I hope you're doing that. And I hope you're safe and doing okay. Today's agenda is Stonewall and Stonewall history, and it is big. It is big. Oh my god, I don't know how to talk. Today's video is all about Stonewall and the history of Pride and how we got to where we are now as a community. It is very, very important, and I think a lot of people aren't aware of it. I wasn't aware of it until quite recently. So I've done a lot of research and I just want to share with you the history. And I hope it helps you appreciate what we have and how we got here, as well as give you a better understanding of what's going on with the Black Lives Matter movement at the moment and how important people of color are to LGBT rights and history and where we are now. So let's get into it. Stonewall riots took place on June 28th in 1969. At that time, being a part of the LGBT community was considered illegal. This meant that you couldn't join the military, you couldn't practice law, you couldn't practice medicine, and if people found out, you could lose your jobs, you could lose your home. Dancing with a person of the same sex was considered a lewd offense, and you could get arrested for that. You could also get arrested for serving gay people liquor, and you could lose your liquor license and have your bar or liquor store shut down. And it was also illegal to wear less than 3 items of gender-appropriate clothing. So if you were wearing less than 3 items of clothing deemed appropriate for your gender, you would be arrested. So because people in the LGBT community obviously couldn't be out openly, because any form of PDA would get them arrested and probably beaten up, they didn't really have anywhere where they could be themselves, which is why gay bars came around, because it offered them a sanctuary. However, like I said, you weren't legally allowed to serve alcohol to gay people. So a lot of these clubs and bars served as a bring your own liquor sort of arrangement, which obviously isn't what actually happened. They did in fact sell liquor. And the fact that they sold liquor meant that police could come in and raid the bars and be like, we have a reason to go there and arrest people. They are serving liquor illegally. So it gave cops the grounds to come in and raid these bars. And this meant arresting people who were dancing with people of the same sex or suspected cross-dressers. And the way that they would determine if it was a man dressing as a woman, because obviously they're like trans, but I'm gonna, you know what I mean. The female police would take them into the restrooms and check. And if they were cross-dressing or drag queen or trans, they would be arrested. In New York City, it was a really big problem because there was a large amount of LGBT people in New York, with lots of LGBT people moving there. And one of the places where there were a lot of LGBT people who found sanctuary and lived and hung out at bars was a suburb called Greenwich. They pronounce it Greenwich. It's pronounced Greenwich here. Is it pronounced Greenwich in America? One of the most popular gay bars in that area was called Stonewall, and it was particularly attractive for young trans women of color, drag queens of color, and gay men of color. So obviously with all these tenants and patrons who were of color, it was a big place for cops to hit and raid, because not only were they gay, but they were also Black, and we all know how cops feel about that. Raids increased quite drastically in 1969 in an upcoming mayoral. Is that how you say that word? Mayoral? Raids increased quite drastically in 1969 summer, leading up to the mayoral election. And as they picked up and became more frequent, the LGBT community were getting more and more frustrated and angry that they couldn't just exist. You know, like they were just having a good time. All they weren't being rowdy, they weren't doing anything. They were just chilling at a bar like everyone else, having a drink, dancing with people. That's all they were doing. And they were just sick of it. They were sick of being attacked and arrested for just existing. And it kept happening, and it was happening more and more and more. And the more it happened, the angrier the LGBT community got. So as raids picked up over summer of 69, Stonewall was raided multiple times, and one week it was raided twice in a week already, and on Friday the 28th of June the police plan to raid it once more and hopefully close it down for good. However, by the time it got to this point, the patrons were sick of it. They were angry and they were fed up. They didn't want to stand back and just let it happen anymore. They were sick of it. So they took inspiration from women's liberation and Black power. They wanted to go to the streets and make trouble. Attack, attack, attack. So usually when these raids happened, they would go in and they would arrest anyone on suspicion of being a cross-dresser, or people who were serving liquor, or people who were like dancing with people of the same sex. But then the rest of the crowd would like disperse. They'd go out and they'd leave. So instead of leaving and dispersing and going home as they usually would, this time all the patrons hung out on the street. And it was quite a festive atmosphere with people like talking and laughing. But that all changed when a police officer hit a lesbian over the head and then forced her into his car. When this happened, this lady screamed out. She was like, start throwing things, throw coins, throw stones. And so that's what they did. Patrons outside started throwing coins, and they started throwing pebbles, which turned into stones, which turned into bricks, which turned into burning trash cans. Now there's a little bit of stuff happened in between then. So once they started throwing stuff, police called for backup, and then the riot police came and they started throwing bigger stuff, and the police started beating people, and people would beat them back, and the police hid themselves in the bar and barricaded themselves in, and the patrons outside tried to light the bar on fire with the police inside fearing for their lives. Which, you know, fair enough. Now during this time, while this was all happening, a homeless teenage boy named Mark was handed a piece of chalk, and on a brick wall he wrote, "Tomorrow night, Stonewall." So the next night, a bigger crowd of LGBT people came to Stonewall and were ready to fight. And the police came back, and there was another fight. And every night it got bigger and more violent, and there was fires, there was violence, there was beating, there was throwing. Everything was happening, and it was happening to quite an intense level. And a lot of the people who were involved and the people who were at the front line of it were Black trans women, such as Marsha P. Johnson, whom I will be doing a full video on Monday. Stay tuned. This went on for 5 nights, with the most violent of them being the final night on the Wednesday, and then it stopped. What those riots did was they got people talking. They made people aware, and they made people see that there was a problem with this, and it brought the wider community closer together, and it sparked having meetings and starting organizations, and it got other residents of the neighborhood involved who weren't part of the LGBT community. It got people talking about the mistreatment of the LGBT community, and it got people talking about it and trying to understand it more. And 1 month after the riots, a lesbian named Martha Shelley stood up on a fountain, afraid for her life, and announced that they needed to do something. So on that day, another big group of LGBT people had signs, and they marched to Stonewall screaming "Gay Power." That march was the first time LGBT people openly marched, ever. So that rally that Martha Shelley and a few other gays did is what sparked them to organize the big gay march the year later on the anniversary of Stonewall. Before the Stonewall riots happened, LGBT activists were quiet and they would politely ask for things. They didn't want to cause any conflict. They were afraid. But after the Stonewall riots, it turned things from being polite requests into angry demands. They wanted people to listen, and they now had the courage to do it because they saw that they could fight back and they could win, and they were sick of it, and they weren't going to take the shit anymore. The riots sparked people to start fighting regularly and start being louder and using their voices and understanding that as a community they could achieve so much. Martha Shelley, who organized the rally and the march, said that the march and the fight and the things they were fighting for were less about legal change and legal rights and more about visibility and overturning the systems of oppression. They wanted to be seen and they wanted to be heard, and that's why you hear them chanting, "We're here, we're queer, get used to it." They were there and they were fighting for recognition and to be treated just as people. They wanted people to be aware that they were there and that they weren't going anywhere and that they would no longer hide who they are, and people just had to deal with it. They were fighting for sexual liberation. They were fighting for freedom of the draft, for reproductive rights. They were fighting to eliminate being arrested on minor drug charges and being imprisoned for it, as well as economic freedom. And this was for everyone, all LGBT people, despite race, despite gender, despite religion. This was a fight for equality for everyone. This is around the same time that the Gay Liberation Front was created. And they're the ones who started organizing the big marches, which turned into Pride. And a year after the first one, it had made its way into London. And so the Gay Liberation Front was here, and Pride started here. And then that spread all around the world. And although that didn't change anything instantly and legal rights weren't changed straight away, it made big strides happen so much faster. It sparked change to happen faster. It sparked people to talk about it. And it sparked just visibility and the understanding that these were people. People were taught, that gay people are sinners and they're all these terrible things and that they have to stay hidden. And so by coming out and saying, hey, we're people too, it just really allowed people to see that and understand that better. The strides for equality just happened so much quicker after that, worldwide. The fact that these 5-day riots that took place in New York City sparked change all over the globe is absolutely phenomenal. And we owe so much to that. And we owe so much to the people that were there and that threw those stones and those bricks and burned things and fought back. We owe so much to them. And a lot of those people, as I said, were queer trans women or queer men of color. We would not be here without them. And I think that that is really, really important to remember at a time like right now. We owe so much to them, to those people that fought for us back then. We wouldn't be here without them. I don't know where we'd be right now with equality and with gay rights. We wouldn't have Pride. So I want you to think about this history over the course of the month. Think about where we came from and give gratitude to those who fought for us to be here. The fight is long but over, but thank them for the freedoms that we have and for the fact that we are visible. We owe so, so much to them. I hope that you learned something here. I hope that you're out there fighting for what's right at the moment. And I hope that you're out there standing with people of color and fighting for them. And I hope that you're holding the hands of fellow queer people of color. And just everyone. Just fight for equality for everyone. That's what we're here for. That's what the movement started as and will continue to be. It is the fight for true equality. Despite religion, despite gender, despite race, everyone. Equality for everyone. Okay? Great. Glad we have that sorted. Thank you for coming along. I hope you've learned something. I hope you've taken something away from this, and I hope that you give thanks to the people who got us here and don't forget about them and don't forget our origin. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Keep fighting. I love you. And when you close your eyes,